What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. As you can see, we're back in the garage, and needless to say, I've got a lot of updating to do. We've been to the Thunderhill Major. We finished first in both races, was on pole one of the days, had a minor issue that basically prevented me from running in the second qualifying session. Get to that a little bit later. But before we dive into more about the race weekend, what did I have to do to get there? Well, check this out. So even though this seems a little out of whack and realistically stickers should be last, I needed to work around TJ's scheduling, so we had to get started on the vinyl right away. Now, a few videos ago, we went over the car with the industrial mold sealer that is a Loctite product. That helped at least get a layer that we could glue vinyl to, but even with that mold sealer helping the vinyl stick, it still needed a lot more help, especially in certain areas. That's where the ProBond adhesive promoter came in really handy. It basically made vinyl that wasn't sticking to the car glued to it, and it worked out spectacularly. Now, clearly we went for a little bit of an Eddie Van Halen guitar inspired look, and some of you are going to second guess the pink, but let's be honest, there's not a lot of pink race cars out there. Me personally, I am really happy with how this turned out, even though we still need a little bit more pink in certain areas to complete the stripes. Even with the mold sealer, even with the adhesion promoter, even with TJ's expertise, this all could have gone horribly wrong if we had the wrong material. So thank you to Tony and the Yak Graphics team for getting together not just the most amazing color, but the best vinyl we could get to help work with such a low grip surface. So one of the other unfortunate things that needed to happen before going to Thunderhill Raceway Park was completing a left side exhaust. It sounds silly, but if I was using my right hand side exhaust that I used at the test day, well, I just wouldn't pass the 103 dB sound limit, or at least come really close to not passing. Doing a left-hand side exhaust required a completely separate header that was welded together by Ted Arkin as well, and Kevin came over and helped me weld together the last collector and the O2 bung to complete the exhaust system and make it so I can run with no issue at Thunderhill Raceway Park. And now I have a complete exhaust system for the left and right-hand side of my cars, so I'm going to be trouble-free. So one of the things that still needed some attention was the seat back panel. We got it in there pretty nicely for the test day, but I still just wasn't happy with the lower flange and how it met the bottom of the car. Mainly because it just seemed like it was in the wrong position, and we needed to move that up the length of the panel so the bottom of the seat back could move up against the fuel bladder. Now, what I decided to do was take the existing one, which honestly might not be usable, and just modify it so that that would give us an idea as to how to make a better one. So this got me to the point where I was super happy with how it fit, and from here, it was smooth sailing to just replicate the panel and put in a new one. So one of the major issues that was lingering since, let's call it the dyno, and throughout the test day, I'm just not generating enough charging or current or voltage through the stator and the rectifier. Now, most cars use an alternator, which is a better way of generating charging your vehicle. This is a motorcycle, weight's everything, so they stayed with stators and rectifiers. So option A, decrease what I'm using, which really isn't an option. Option B was the upgrade. We decided to go with the upgrade, even though there was a chance that a part of mine was damaged. When in doubt, more current, please. So unfortunately, as a part of upgrading the stator in the motor or underneath the cover of the motor, well, the engine needs to not necessarily come out, but be removed enough that it can go up 6 inches so I can access that little black cover at the bottom of your screen here. Fortunately, it wasn't that bad, and honestly, I could use the practice. I'm a little bit rusty on pulling Stohr engines, and honestly, it really wasn't that bad. Now, upgrading the stator is going to hopefully solve all of my charging issues, either the damage that was existing in the stator or just generate enough current to provide all of my electrical needs. Now with the stator, there's a crank trigger, so positioning everything exactly how it needs to be is really important, but fortunately, it's really difficult to make a mistake. Everything really finds home really well, and we'll throw on a lithium rectifier to boot. Now, along with these major little things that had to happen, I really wasn't happy with the brake bias, so I decided to square up the master cylinders, so now they're both 3/4 inch master cylinders on both the front and the rear. One of the unforeseen little gremlins that popped up on the test day was, well, my calipers didn't have enough clearance on the rotors. So we're using some really thin shim stock to help make sure that there's enough space between the caliper and the top face of the rotor. So obviously when it came down to the setup, a lot of the positioning as far as toe, ride height, you know, shock settings, springs, a lot of stuff didn't change. The main fundamental thing that needed to change was how much camber we put into the car. With the bias ply tires, we normally run them relatively straight up, especially in the rear. We would maybe have a 1/2 degree in the fronts and then almost just ever so slightly negative in the rear. That and, well, with bias plies, they take a lot of abuse. You can run excess toe in and toe out. However, we did really have a lot of success running little to no toe with the bias ply tires. Now the radials, they are camber hungry. And not just that, they are camber sensitive by comparison. So with Thunderhill being a left-hand dominant track by a long shot, in fact, I think there's what? 1, 2, we won't count that one, but 3, 4 corners where you're turning right. And it's a 15 corner racetrack. So knowing that, I did my best guess. We ran the max amount of camber on the right hand side of the car. We cut it a 1/4 degree short on the left hand side. So 3.5 in the front, 2.5 degrees in the rear, 2 1/4, 3 1/4. And that's how I rolled the dice. Oh, but besides that, decided because I was putting the butt of the car on the ground, I ran a little bit excess ride height, both in the front. At the bottom of the tray, I was at 2 1/8 of an inch. Now, the tricky part is, I'm trying to run about 3/8 of an inch, and the floor thickness is 3/8, and I was measuring to a back portion of the floor, so my calculations aren't correct because my actual measurement was 2 5/8 to the bottom of the frame, which means I was really only running 1/8 of an inch of rake by the time the floor was accounted for. So one of the things I'm going to try this year is roughing in the scale pads with a laser. I know it sounds a little silly, but I just don't have enough experience and enough trust to think that I'm getting it just right by just using the laser, so I'll be checking it with a big bubble level. But I will say, using the laser beam greatly decreased the amount of time it takes to set up the scale pads. Now that I've got the scale pads set up, I might as well get all the little pieces on my car and find out how bad her minimum weight really is. And needless to say, I am thrilled. 1,111 pounds. And realistically, my minimum weight's gonna be 1,100. Now, one of the other things I had to do was install a little L bracket or channel on the front diffuser. That's gonna hold my tow bars for the remainder of the car's life. Now, as I mentioned, we've got the camber, got the ride height set. All I had left with this video is to set the tow. And gosh, there's another thing I've got to sort out, and that is how to do tow, especially on the front end of the car by myself. I think I'm going to have to get another steering wheel adapter and make some sort of bracket so the steering wheel is held flat at all times. Because as I was doing the front tow, everybody's done this, where do an adjustment, the steering wheel turns, do an adjustment, steering wheel turns. Unless you have somebody in there holding the steering wheel straight, This is just a never-ending back and forth game. So I've got to come up with a solution to this. That's going to be something I'll show you in the next video. Other than the issues with the oversteer and the radiator cap and the fact that lowering the back end of the car started putting it on the ground, I really had a pretty spectacular weekend. I went faster than I've ever gone around Thunderhill, even though it's not quite a track record. It's close enough that I'm actually pretty proud of it. The track record is about a 1:35.5, I think. Don't quote me on that. But I was able to do a 1:37.5 out the gate with this brand new car I put together, which I still don't believe really happened. My previous best time was like a 39.9 or a 39.8, and that was when I felt like everything was working perfectly. I'm still not the driver I want to be. I'm still driving behind the car, getting reacclimated to the speed at which this car can go. Mechanically, it's not quite there. I'm still not happy with the brakes. We're going to work on that, have some proof of what we're doing to change it in the next video. I was struggling with the shifting most of the weekend, but then we found out that it was probably due to the braking system locking the rears. Again, we'll talk about that more later. And then just the fact that I just shot from the hip with the setup, and I know that there's more when it comes to getting the car properly dialed in terms of the suspension sets and just my ability to drive the car. Being 2 seconds back from the track records, I'm pretty stoked. That, and of course, just being able to finish both races is probably the bigger accomplishment. The fact that I wasn't pulling in early except for the one qualifying session, I'm thrilled I was able to do my job as a mechanic and get to the racetrack and be ready to race. But enough about me blabbling on. Thank you all for following along. I'm going to be able to do a much better job documenting the weekends going forward. Thunderhill was just a pretty unique scenario for me where it was the first time out. I was already overwhelmed and honestly very afraid and anxious as to how everything was going to shake out. How the weekend went gave me a lot of confidence where I don't need to think so critically about the car anymore. I get to take a step back and get back on to creating content. So look forward to better videos when I get to Hallett Motorsports Park, and another video here shortly cataloging what I need to do to get ready to leave. So that's going to be it for this wrap-up video. Unfortunately, I've only got one in-car race from the race weekend, but the good news is we'll have that problem sorted by the time I get to Hallett Motorsports Park. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for subscribing up to this point. But most importantly, there's some really important people I need to thank right now. Thank you, Kevin Mitz. Thank you, John and Billy Manfroy. Thank you, George Dean. Thank you, Franz Diebold, TJ Suit, Dave and Ellen Ferguson, Brandon Kraus, Roger Kraus, Mike Devins, Stohr Race Cars and the Clayton family, Youngblood and Ryan, Tony at Yak Graphics, and of course, thank you, Jessica. Look forward to a new video popping up soon. In the meantime, thank you again for subscribing and watching these videos.